and welcome to the Cricket Collective on Talk Sport 2. I'm Jon Norman, and pleased to say we have got an hour of radio gold ahead of us, because what else can occur off the back of arguably the greatest series of all time? We're going to be looking back at an incredible 4-test series between Australia and England with a man who knows a thing or two about playing in greatest series, Steve Harmison, and a cricket historian who can tell us just where this series ranks. And between the three of us, as well as Chetan Narul, the Indian broadcaster, who'll pop up for a section, just dissect a wonderful topsy-turvy come from behind victory for India in the early hours of the morning UK. Lots to get on with, so let's do exactly that. We are talking on the Cricket Collective about Australia against India. Well, gentlemen, Jarrod, as I was going to bed last night after day 4 with forecasts of rain on day 5, never believe the weather forecast, by the way, my motto in life continues. I was thinking about what my opening question to you was going to be, and I'd already decided to ask you the question that is about to be asked, and then the events of day 5. And it's so fitting. In a weird way, it would have probably been more fitting if day 5 had been washed out to rain. That would have been cricket in a nutshell for you, wouldn't it? As a man who has literally studied every single test series in the history of the game and written a book about it, was this series the greatest ever?
Oh, that's a big call, isn't it? Do you know what? When I wrote my book, I didn't want to write too much about 05 Ashes or 01 Australia, because there's no doubt that this was a better series than 01. 05 Ashes, I mean, I don't know, but it's when it comes to what happened on the field, the ridiculous nature of it, the theatre that Australia, India bring off the field, from everything from Steve Smith's foot through to people heckling Virat Kohli's wife for having a baby. It has been just a phenomenally weird, captivating series. If you're asking me right now, I would struggle to find a better series than it. If you give me more than 3 hours sleep, I might be able to give you a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, it's a bit like, it reminds me of what happened when Ben Stokes played his innings, and everyone's like, is this the greatest innings ever? And you're just like, look, I'm not saying that your question's wrong. What I'm saying is, I haven't fully processed what just happened. If you could give me a second, I might come back to you. But certainly, it's one of the great test series of all time. Made even better by the fact that India made themselves into an underdog, which I didn't think in modern cricket was even possible anymore.
Steve Harmison, you got an MBE off the back of it. You were part of the 2005, the DVD. I've got the DVD, the greatest ever series. As someone who starred in it, as someone who played his part in quite a few amazing series, 04, 05 in South Africa springs to mind. Was this the best series? Is 2021 Australia versus India? Is this the greatest series ever?
Yeah, I'm like Jarrod. I think it's up there. I think it's difficult to compare series because of the actual participants in it. When I look at this series, and think this was just as eventful off the field than it was on the field, or just as eventful not in sort of competition play, because of the sledging that went on, Steve Smith doing that, the amount of bowlers that India have used, the headaches that Australia had right at the very start, when they're probably 3 weeks out before the first test match against India. They had the settled opening pair picked. They had a team that's thinking, right, we're going to go hard at these Indians. Then all of a sudden, openers didn't play, makeshift openers come in, all this stuff that went with it, the COVID. I think everything that captivated off the field was just as good as what it was on the field. So I think it's right up there with the level of theatre, like Jarrod said, of what the series was. Actual participants in the 2001, Australian India 2001. Some of the greats of the game went toe to toe in that series. Arguably similar in 2005. For me, the greatest side that's ever played the game in my generation, in my lifetime, that Australia side in both of them. The level of competition in cricket that was involved in both of them probably outweighs what happened in this series. But for the theatre, the drama, and everything that went into it, I think that side of it's better than 2001 and 2005. Actual cricket, possibly not as competitive as what the other two were, but every bit as thrilling and enthralling to watch.
I would say that there's something else that 2005 Ashes had and 2001 had that maybe just pushes it above what we've seen here. Although in a way, I'm going to counter my own point, but you had characters. And I think this is one of the problems that England have got. There's very, very few characters in that 11 now. Stokes, that's about it, really, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, that's it, right? 2005, you had the greatest side of all time. I don't need to list them. But on the English side, you also had characters. Yourself, Flintoff, KP. And that just makes it more interesting. And this is what this series has had. The characters, Australia always come up with characters. And you got them in this side. So they tick all those boxes. Where it kind of changed is the fact that, of course, there's only two people in the India side who played in all 5 test matches. Pujara and also Rahane. And Rahane didn't start out as captain, so you could almost argue his role changed as well. That is absolutely unheard of. Added to the fact that, like 2005 and 2001, the winning team came from behind to win the series. Again, that's not something that happens very often in cricket. But one of the things that you'd have to say does put this series ahead of 2001, 2005 is that it was the visiting team that won. And that, again, if you look at all the statistics, that should never have happened. And to happen at the Gabba as well, Jarrod, that Tim Paine, he will never, ever be remembered for anything more than his chirping to Ashwin saying, "I can't wait to get you at the Gabba." That will be replayed for the rest of his life.
Well, to overcome the Gabba, so the last team to win at the Gabba was the West Indies with a near full-strength West Indies side. I think it was the greatest West Indies side that ever played. And by that, I mean, it was the team that played the most. So I think the most tests by 11 players ever is 11 tests. And I think it was that team that won at the Gabba was that 11 players that played. So they played the most of any one lineup ever has. They were incredible. I'm not sure you can compare that to a team where you've got Washington Sundar, who hasn't played first-class cricket in 1,000 days. Literally, it was a pandemic hit side for India up against a full-strength Australian side. You can say there are weaknesses in the Australian side. I think that's fair, but it was a full-strength Australian side. Then you've got just the Gabba as a general thing, as you've already talked about. People don't chase at the Gabba. People don't win at the Gabba. India wasn't expected to do particularly well at the Gabba as a general rule. And, if you go back to, sorry to bring this up, although Harmy's probably okay with this. He missed most of this era, but Goffey may not want to hear this. But if you go back to the 80s and 90s, every time England had a tour where there was 20 guys playing or 15 guys in the 11, it meant that someone had been sent home in disgrace. 3 other guys had been caught by the tabloids doing something, and there'd been 4 different keepers and 5 different captains. And India had all that, and they kept getting better as the series went on. I mean, this was if you look at the Sydney Test, they were really good in the Sydney Test, but that was a declaration match. That they didn't have to get all 20 wickets in. They had to get all 20 wickets in this one. Australia probably would have kept batting on. Australia knew that India could do this. Absolutely incredible, the levels of difficulty that they kept putting on top of everything, step after step. I mean, you talk about not all the players playing in all the tests. Rishabh Pant wasn't picked in the first test. He wasn't even, he's ended up being this incredible star. Siraj, if Bhuveshwar Kumar, Ishant Sharma, Umesh Yadav, Mohammad Shami, and Jasprit Bumrah all. Maybe if you got 1 or 2 injuries in that, Siraj doesn't even play. He just, you know what I mean? It's a ridiculous situation to be there. And then even in that last test when they win, Saini injured himself. he barely bowled in the first innings. He came back. I think he bowled a spell in the second innings where he looked like me bowling. He was so cooked. Just ridiculous. The hurdles and hurdles they kept putting on in front of themselves, which you usually don't do in tests. To come back from that is incredible.
A quick question. We're going to talk much more about this, but we were both at Headingley in 2019. And the question I remember being asked, and I think I asked you, was at what point did you think to yourself, hang on, England could win this? And I really noticed that the crowd very, very early on were really connected and enthused and energized and seemingly believed that England could do it when they were well short. You stayed up all night. You've been writing some brilliant stuff throughout the series. At what point did you think, hang on, India are going to win this?
It's a really good question. I think, I've written a lot about chases in fourth innings, and I think everyone thinks they happen all the time now because we've seen a bunch recently. But when you factor in how many tests are played, I think the percentage actually went down. It may have gone up now thanks to, Kusal and Stokes and this test. But it's really hard to chase over 300. They were just so in control. And every time you looked at them in the middle, you went, well, if Pujaра's got one end and they just keep finding someone who slogs a couple at the other end, they're a huge chance. So almost from maybe halfway through the second session, you were like, Australia can't take enough wickets. Australia can't win. So the only thing that can happen here is the pitch plays up and India have to play for a draw. That was all you could see that was happening. And it's very rare in a chase like that you feel that comfortable. But in the end, I think it was justified. They got their 7 wickets down, and that was only because they had to, put their foot down. Realistically, it was how much of that was just that, again, Pat Cummins bowled godlike level. The rest of the Australians, you could kind of handle them. So, yeah, I think from midway through the day, it was like, this is India's match to lose, which is such a bizarre thing to think in a 300 chase with a second string batting lineup at the Gabba.
You're listening to the Cricket Collective on TalkSport 2 with myself, Jon Norman, Jarrod, Kimber and Steve Harmison. Loads to talk about. Where now for Tim Paine? Where now for Australia? Nathan Lyon, will there be question marks about him? The much vaunted pace attack, should actually some fresh legs have been brought in to that Gabba test match. And what kind of India side are England going to face? We're going to speak to Chetan Narul as well. He's going to be exhausted after also getting up early and being put through the ringer. You're listening to the Cricket Collective on TalkSport 2.
I can't wait to get you to the Gabba, Ash. Tell you what. Woo-hoo.
She's never done that.
Just like we want to get you to India. That'll be your last 3. Maybe you were selected here as well.
I've had this in the past about wait till we get you to Perth. I mean, I'm scared. I'm really scared. But they did the same to him and said, wait till we get you to the Gabba. You know what I mean? It's like they're going to pick a different player.
There's a certain point where how great a person is he if he has to go around telling everyone else that he has more friends than everyone else?
What Tim Paine said to Ashwin was, my job's on the line here. I'm under pressure. And he's come out and said something that he didn't need. I don't think he would have said it a year ago. I don't even think he would have said it 6 months ago. But I think this guy, his job's on the line. And I think he's realising that. And I think that's why he said what he said.
That's it! Edge down! Paine grasps it. And it punches out of his hand. And hits the ground. Is that the victory gone right there? It's full. It's down the ground. It'll be at least one. Saini has got an injury with the groin. It goes as far as the fence. India, incredible. Rishabh Pant is the star. India win the test. They win the series.
I'm loving it, mate. Look, I'm going to cop heaps of flack. I know that. I've been absolutely belted by the Indians for about 7 days. It's been interesting.
You're listening to Cricket Collective on TalkSport 2. Myself, Jon Norman, Steve Harmison and Jarrod Kimber looking back at the series. Pretty much of all the classic series, this one deserves to be mentioned in the same breath. Jarrod, went out for Tim Paine then. I know he was asked about his captaincy, but once again, it's fine margins, but they were his fine margins to essentially control. He should have walked away from England, the first Australian captain to win the Ashes in England. Jimmy Anderson injured in first session, Superman coming in at number 3, and of course how he got England to bat first at the Oval in the fifth test. I still don't understand. And of course, DRS at Headingley. I'm sorry, but same thing in this series. Australia should have won this series. And if they'd taken their catches, if he'd taken his catches in the third test, they would have won the series. It's as simple as that. So I know he was, well, let's actually hear from him, actually. He was talking after the game.
I've said many times in the last 2 or 3 years, mate, that I don't look past the next series. I'm 36 years old. Like I said, I'm loving doing my job. It's a difficult job, and at times like this, it can be bloody hard work when you're copying it left, right and centre, but that's what I signed up for. I didn't play my best cricket at times in this series, but that can happen. As I said, I'll go away. I'll look to get better. Look to improve certain parts of my game for the next series. And again, I won't be looking past that series.
So Australian captain Tim Paine there. Jarrod, I'll ask you the question again. Where now for Tim Paine as captain of the Australian cricket team?
I'm pretty sure you asked me last week, and I don't think much has changed. I don't believe that there is a wicketkeeper that they think is better than Tim Paine at the moment. Alex Carey is probably who they're going to bring in. Alex Carey's not a particularly good first-class cricketer. The other guys are good. There's a couple of good T20 players and younger players, but I'm not sure there's a wicketkeeper ready. So that is confusing. Unless they go back to Steve Smith, there's no captaincy option either. So you've got Pat Cummins is probably the next best option. Maybe Nathan Lyon. You've got him under the pump as well. So it's a really weird situation that they've found themselves in. They haven't been making leaders for a long time. I remember it must have been about 7 or 8 years ago now. Victoria were forced or suggested to drop Cameron White as captain to bring in Matthew Wade as captain because Australia was looking around the cupboard going, we need to create some captains here. And, 7, 8 years later, they have not created any potential captains out there. Even guys like George Bailey, a couple of years ago, probably might have had to come in and done what Tim Paine has done now, but he's retired. I think he's on the coaching staff at the moment. So it's a very, very weird situation. But you're right. I mean, I thought looking back, and this is very, very weird, but looking back, they celebrated the win against England when they were 2-1 up in that Ashes series way too early. They thought they'd broken England's spirit. They partied like they'd won the entire series. They make a mistake at the Oval. They played poorly at the Oval as well. England come back. It's a bit similar. I think they just thought they would win in Sydney. I think Melbourne was fine. India isn't that much worse a team. Full strength. Let's take away whatever just happened in that test. But full strength, India that isn't that much worse of a team. But I think they got, they just thought they would win in Sydney. And it's also worth saying that they played David Warner when he was, I don't know if you can be on one leg if you've got an injured groin, but he couldn't walk in Sydney. They played Mitchell Starc in this test, knowing that he wasn't fully fit, knowing that he wasn't at top speed. They threw all their best players at this series. Paine had pretty much everyone he wanted other than missing out Warner just for a little time. They still don't have opening batsmen, no matter what they say. They still have weakness right throughout the middle order. They didn't trust their all-rounder that much. And when they did trust him, he didn't take any wickets either. And Paine made mistakes with the gloves. He had an okay series with the bat. And captaincy, again, he looked a little bit bereft. But I'm not sure what decision they could make now that wouldn't be knee-jerk to get rid of him. I don't see how that improves them when they've got a tour of South Africa in, 25 minutes time.
Jarrod, do you not think, I know all the stuff that has gone with Tim Paine and stuff that he had where Ashwin didn't help and everything, that's gone on this morning last night out in Australia. But the real problem for Australia is they're not scoring runs at the top of the order. And that, for me, would far outweigh any captaincy issues. Because I look in this series so far, you've had 8 innings in this series so far. 5 out of the 8 innings, Australia have been 2 or 3 down before 50 runs. Now, if anybody was asking me, I've never won in Australia, but if anybody's asking me, the key to success to win in Australia is getting first innings runs on the board. And if you're consistently being 2 down, 3 down, then there's an issue. The captaincy, if you've got good senior players and if he is a good senior player, the likes of Steve Smith and Warner and the bowling attack that you've got, you could potentially bring in a young captain, somebody, a novice, stick him in at number 6 and give him a chance to captain and mould his side, like they did years ago with probably like Alan Border. I remember talking to David Boone for years about how good Alan Border did. There are South Africa did it with Graham Smith, so there are options out there that can captain the team. But if you're not getting runs at the top of the order, you can't win Test matches. And we are talking about Australia with for me, the best 4 bowlers in world cricket when they're together, especially in their conditions, in Stark, Hazelwood, Cummins, and Lyon. So the captaincy is one thing, but the top of the order is a whole new ballgame for Australia. And if they don't get that right, no matter how good the bowling attack is, they ain't going to win Test matches.
No, they're fundamentally not going to change who they are as a side by dumping Tim Paine. And there will be calls for it, and it may even happen. But they are a flawed side. If you go back to the 19 Ashes, no one was saying they were an incredible side. What they were saying is that they had 5, 6, 7 players who were just next level.
Yeah.
And they have had those players. I mean, they almost won a World Cup with 5 or 6 players. They weren't that far away quite a few times, even in the series that they've lost. It's been the same thing. And this is basically since Chris Rogers retired, they have struggled at the top. I mean, you talk about these young batsmen, a young captain coming in. I mean, Alan Border was already averaging close to 50, I think, at that stage. Graham Smith was a behemoth who challenged Sean Pollock to a duel when he was left out of the 2003 World Cup squad. Those are huge personalities. The only 2 gun young batsmen Australia have, Marnus Labuschagne, who has been kind of picked on by his own team and is this weird personality, and Will Pucovski, who is problems with concussion and depression. Those are really good batsmen. I don't think giving them the captaincy is going to change anything. Fundamentally, your original point is true. They don't have a strong, let's say top 6.
Yeah.
They don't have a strong top 6. Paine, is an average number 7. Warner is flawed when he goes away from home, and when he's in form, we know he's almost unstoppable. Steve Smith is probably the best Test batsman since Bradman, certainly in terms of actual runs scored per Test. And then you've got, if Marnus keeps batting the way he is and doesn't get worked out, you've got something there. But you've just got this fluctuation between what those 3 guys who can bat can do and what you're putting in around them. And that's why you end up being, 2 for 10 and 2 for 45 and those sorts of things. And then you fall apart. And India, you could hear the chatter with India quite a bit was, we're not far away here. And Australia would be 2 or 3 down. It used to be that you had Brad Haddin or Adam Gilchrist coming in at number 7. I don't think teams felt that way back then. Whereas now teams just feel that Australia's a little bit weak. When you have the best 3-seam bowling unit in world cricket, and a really top level 400 wicket taking almost, Test bowler, Test spinner, you can overcome so many of those problems. But it's a bit like when England had that lineup where they had all their all-rounders and they still didn't have a very strong batting lineup. What happens is you have great win and then a confusing loss, and then a great win and then an embarrassing loss. And that's what Australia's been doing, just sort of fluctuating between that. They can't win consistently because they can't consistently score over 350. And when it comes down to it, that is not Tim Paine's fault.
You talk about the lack of runs. You're absolutely right. And they didn't have Steve Smith performing, miraculous deeds in the middle order. And that really showed the team up. You only have to go back to the 2017 18 Ashes, even the 2013-14 Ashes, both those successes were built essentially on one batsman, and Brad Haddin usually, and then Steve Smith and one other. So this problem has been there for quite a while, but how disappointing will it be for Australia? You talk about the best bowling attack in world cricket. They had a chance to bowl out India on day 5 at the SCG. They couldn't manage it. They had a chance to bowl out India at the Gabba on day 5. They didn't do it. So yes, batting, but that kind of, how do we sit with that? We hold them up, these guys, as the best. I can't think of a better bowling attack, but when it came to it, they fluffed their lines.
But the thing from a bowler's point of view, sorry, Jarrod, I'll just come in just a second. The thing from a bowler's point of view, once that bowling with a kookaburra ball, once it goes a bit softer, then it is very, very difficult to sort of penetrate and go through a side, bang, bang, bang. Unless it's turning Sydney, 4th innings, you're in the game, especially if you've got my experience, Shane Warne. But I actually think it is very, very difficult to sort of blast through a side on any sort of surface when the Kookaburra ball goes soft, comes back to the run scoring, scoreboard pressure. If you've got runs on the board, and I know India chased 300 and 360 unheard of, but there are times where the anomaly comes in. But I do sometimes think when the ball does go soft, it is very, very difficult on any surface in Australia to penetrate and go through a side, no matter how good your bowlers are. But what you have had in the past is scoreboard pressure with runs on the board. First innings runs is huge. And for me, I'll go back to, if you don't score runs in Australia, you don't win cricket matches, no matter how good your bowling attack is.
I think there's really a couple of things. I think Harley's right about the ball, but also the Sydney pitch and the Brisbane pitch didn't fall apart. No. And that's not giving the Australian bowlers an excuse, because they've run through a lot of teams before when that hasn't happened. But what I would say is that Mitchell Starc looked shot in the last two matches, and they were the two that they needed him to stand up. And Nathan Lyon didn't stand up at all series. He just couldn't take wickets. So if we're talking about the best bowling attack, and I think the best seam bowling attack, I think, certainly India at full strength, if they ever get to full strength ever again, is probably a slightly stronger attack because they can play 5 frontline bowlers. But when it comes down to it, 2 of the bowlers didn't stand up for 2 of the most important tests. And I don't think you can blame Hazelwood or Cummins. I think they were incredible right to the end. But at the other end, it just wasn't there for them. And that seems to be what keeps happening to Australia. A player or 2 players stand up and you don't get a full team effort. And realistically, they only needed 1 full team effort to put India away in this series. It could have been at Melbourne, it could have been at Sydney, and it could have been at Brisbane. They never got one. And that has been the story of the last couple of years for them.
You're listening to the Cricket Collective on TalkSport 2. Myself, Steve Harmison, and Jarrod Kimber. After the break, we will be joined by Chetan Narul, straight out of India, to find out exactly how this series win has gone down.
Paddy Cummins, so often the man for Australia.
Easy catch.
Oh.
Edged. Gone. Edged and gone. Another one. Edged and gone again. 2 in the over for Josh Hazelwood.
He's caught it.
Gone mid-wicket. Oh, that is beautifully taken. He's just too good, Hazelwood. Oh, that's nasty. Well, looks like a retired hurt. Australia could not have wished for anything more this morning.
You're listening to the Cricket Collective on TalkSport 2. Myself, Jon Norman, Steve Harmison, Jarrod Kimber, and I am delighted to say we can cross to Delhi now to get the reaction from Chetan Narul, who, like Jarrod, has been up for most of the night. He's been broadcasting for All India Radio, covering this amazing series. Just give us an idea, Chetan, of the reaction back home.
Oh, elation. That's the first word, and shock, awe. I mean, this is unprecedented. I mean, 2001. It's been 20 years since we've seen anything like this. One glorious moment that comes to mind is MS Dhoni's 6 at the World Cup final. But again, that was just ODI cricket. Test cricket is much more lengthy, and it just, like I said, drains you emotionally. This series has been really, really tough just to witness it, given how many issues there were with the COVID situation, with the bio bubble, and of course Virat Kohli on paternity leave, and so many players getting injured left, right, and center. It's almost like a hospital ward, not an Indian dressing room. So nobody gave them a chance, but they have fought back so well, so hard, and nobody really expected this. So elation, like I said, and along with that, some surprise as well.
Chin, what's it going to do for Jarrod as well? What's it going to do for Indian Test match cricket? Because, we look at how many players have used, and there's probably the likes of Sundar, Thakur, who had a great Test match, and Natcharan. They might only play 1 or 2 Test matches in their career. Is this the Test match, because it's so white ball dominated Indian cricket and IPL and probably 50 over cricket before the 2011 World Cup win. You're thinking, where is 50 over cricket going to go? But was Test match cricket slowly getting pushed to one side because of how big IPL was and one day cricket is? And has this just sort of put this back on the forefront of the population of India?
Well, Test cricket never really went away in that manner. I mean, it's always been there because it's the most prominent format, and it's not just because the players come out and say that the primacy of Test cricket has always been there, because at the end of the day, T20 cricket is just slam bang. Even if it's scientific, as Jarrod would say, it's scientific slam bang now. ODI much more like a chess game, but still, Test cricket has that primacy. But you have to be very careful in analyzing it, because you look at the broadcasts or the broadcasters and the financial terms that they have put out and what is going to be the next broadcast rights cycle. So Test cricket has to take a step back. There is no doubt about it. We have to be prepared for the realities of a post-COVID era as well. But as far as bringing new audiences into the Test cricket fold, I'm not sure if it's done anything for that except recreate that love or recreate that attachment for the longer format of the game, because there's so many. Just a small example, there's so many questions about Cheteshwar Pujara's strike rate, for example. I'm sure over the last 2 Test matches, when you look at Hanuma Vihari batting 100 deliveries or Ashwin batting 100 deliveries, and the way they've chased today, batting around Pujara, I think the newer generation will probably start to accept Test cricket or assimilate Test cricket a bit more into their cricketing psyche.
I think it's almost the best case scenario if you think about it from one perspective. Is there's never been more people who have access to cricket in India than you have right now. So the IPL has opened it up to women and to people from other regions, non-traditional Indian background. I mean, we always think of everyone in India loving cricket, but it's not always been the case right across the country. The IPL has opened that up. And what you have is, it was hilarious watching the series and having people say to me, Siraj isn't any good. I've seen him bowl for RCB. He's just like, my man, no one cares. No one cares how he bowls for RCB. And you actually saw fans between the ages of about 15, 16 to probably 30 start to work this out. And they're already cricket fans and they already want India to win. And suddenly they had something that they could attach. It was so entertaining. And it's not like India and Australia played a really good, some really good Test series over the last couple of years. The last one in the last one in India was an incredible Test series as well. There was also VVS Laxman, squirting by 8 wickets down to beat Australia a couple of years ago as well. This was 4 Tests of incredible theatre played out in front of everyone because of COVID, because you couldn't look away. I just think it has a chance of energizing people and educating people to what the game is. I'm not sure it would create any more new cricket fans, but it probably allows some of them to go, I tell you what it was. I used to talk to young Indian fans, they used to say that Test matches were for their uncles or from their fathers. I'm not sure that they're saying that right now.
And that arguably what happened with 2005 Ashes in this country. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. But Chetty, what about Rishi Pant? He's gone from overweight. He's gone from overweight out of every franchise, not wanting to be picked up by IPL. Out of every team in India, to not playing in the first Test match, to coming off in Brisbane, an absolute superstar. Has the penny finally dropped for Rishi Pant?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. He was always considered a future star of Indian cricket. I think the future has arrived. There's always going to be this debate about his wicket keeping and his batting temperament and all, but you can't beat the fact that he almost took India to the verge of victory in Sydney, at least gave them a hope of victory in Sydney when there was none, when they were actually looking to bat out the day. And again today, when again there was no real hope, because how many times have you seen 5 and over being chased in the last hour of a day 5 of Test cricket? You haven't seen it in any part of the world. 9.9 out of 10 times it's not going to happen, but today was that 0.1 time. And who did it? It was Rishabh Pant. I think Shubman Gill set it up. Rishabh Pant finished it. Like I said, the future is now. The future for Indian cricket, Indian Test cricket especially, has arrived. And just to add on to Jarrod's points there, with Shubman Gill, and Rishabh Pant. Those were the youngsters, those 15, 16-year-olds. These are the ones they look up to, the likes of Shubman Gill and Rishabh Pant. Suddenly they're seeing them do well in Test cricket. It might not be a new audience, but it will certainly bring a new wave of fans back in love with Test cricket. There's already so much excitement building up for the India-England series.
I was neatly done there, Chetan. I was about to. I know they've announced the squad for the first 2 Test matches, but what will be the starting 11 for that series?
Off the top of my head, if it has to be, if I can, Shubman Gill, Rohit Sharma, Pujara, Kohli, Rahane, that's your top 5. Then number 6 is very interesting because they have KL Rahul and they have Hardik Pandya. Hardik Pandya usually does not feature in Indian Test squads at home because you don't really need that pace bowling all-rounder. And Jadeja is not there, first of all. So that's an interesting bit because he's been playing as a pure batsman and he can really give an impetus to the innings later on in the middle order. So he could play at number 6. Then number 7, Rishabh Pant. Again, I think he should be picked now as the keeper batsman, even in India. Then you have Ashwin, who is expected to be fit. You have 2 other spinners, Kuldeep Yadav and Akshar Patel to choose from. Left-arm variety. I don't think Washington Sundar will play if Ashwin is playing. And then you have Bumrah, who is part of an Indian Test squad at home for the first time. Ishant Sharma is back. And of course, Shardul Thakur has also been retained. So Ashwin, Kuldeep or Akshar Patel for the left-arm variety. And Akshar Patel can bat a bit as well. So you also have Ishant Sharma. And I'm looking forward to Jasprit Bumrah bowling in India.
I don't know if you do ticker tape parades in India. We had Trafalgar Square in 2005. I used to watch Alan Border getting ticker tape parades until Australia just got a bit bored of beating England. But if we weren't living in these COVID times, what kind of response, what kind of scenes would that India squad have arrived back in India to witness?
Well, first of all, I would be sitting in Brisbane right now. And I think Jarrod would be there as well. And we would absolutely be working hard right now and probably looking to go and get a drink at the end of it. But having said that, I think people have really enjoyed themselves today. I've got messages from all my friends who've been working in their offices hard at work. You won't expect to hear from them at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. So you can just see that it's not just people who are following cricket day in and day out. It's everybody who is on it, working from home, working from their offices. They've been following the scores. And if people are texting for so long, I'm sure in terms of their office groups and office chats, the talk has been there. And like I said at the top of the show, or top of my segment really, elation is the word. India, Australia, we don't really play Pakistan too much. India, Australia is the pinnacle of cricketing rivalry for Indian cricket now. No disrespect to India, England. India, England is perhaps second now. India, Australia, I think Ravi Shastri also encouraged his troops by saying, you do well in Australia, everybody will remember you, because he's done well in Australia. That's his way of motivation. So India, Australia, right at the top. And yes, we will never forget this. We've got a moment. We've got 2001, 2011, and 2021.
Every 10 years. Chetan, brilliant stuff, mate. We will be reunited because, of course, England will be in India very, very shortly. I think a couple of the advance party flying from England to India in the next couple of days. We'll touch base with you on that. But enjoy and go and get some sleep.
Yeah, thank you so much. Pleasure.
That was Chetan Narul, and you're listening to the Cricket Collective. Myself, Jon Norman, Steve Harmison and Jarrod Kimber. And we will turn our attention to England in the next section of the show.
It's full, it's down the ground, it'll be at least one. Saini, he's got an injury with the groin. It goes as far as the fence. India, incredible. Rishabh Pant is the star. India win the test. They win the series.
You're listening to the Cricket Collective on TalkSport 2 with myself, Jon Norman, alongside Steve Harmison, member of the 2005 Greatest Ever Series, and Jarrod Kimber, as we look back at the 2021 version Wow, absolutely incredible scenes coming out of Brisbane, and a fitting end. None of that umpires walking out and knocking off the bails to signal a draw, meaning that England had won the Ashes for the first time in a billion years. This was Rishabh Pant smashing one of the best bowlers in world cricket down the ground for a 7-wicket win. Thanks for coming. Absolutely brilliant stuff. Well, let's turn our attention, guys, to India against England. It's a series that we will all be bringing to the TalkSport 2 audience. The first test gets underway on the 5th of February. England, Jarrod, I'll start with you, Jarrod, if you don't mind, Steve. Jarrod, England will be, if they weren't fearful before the Australia series, the task ahead now, it does actually reach winning away in Australia kind of levels of difficulty.
Yeah, I mean, the Sri Lanka series couldn't be at a better time for them to get a bit of a sighter against what is, well, I mean, they didn't even have to bowl in the first innings, did they? Poor Don Bessel embarrassed taking a 5-wicket haul. And it was incredible honesty for him to, sort of come out and go, I don't know how I took that 5 wickets either. But, a really good practice. I think them getting Sri Lanka out in the second innings, everything was sort of setting up quite well. But put it this way, Rohit Sharma's, I thought he did really well as an opener in the 2 tests in Australia. He's probably going to end up with an average of about 35. He'll look like he's given away a bunch of starts, but I thought he was really positive. He put Australia on the back foot. Have a look at Rohit Sharma's record opening in India. If Rohit Sharma gets away in India, I don't even know what England can do to slow him down. He is such another otherworldly player. And he's a different batsman in India than he is everywhere else. And, I would say he's a better batsman in India than Virat Kohli is. He just isn't as good as an all-round player. And there's so many players like that. Jadeja may not play in the series, but Jadeja's basically unplayable at India at times. You've got Ashwin, again, basically unplayable in India at many times. And the fast bowlers, when they do come back, guys like Ishant Sharma have turned into absolute superstars with the ball over there. And India has just been crushing teams. India have been playing at home the way that Australia used to play at home. It is a huge, huge thing. And now they've suddenly, we now find out that they don't just have 14 or 15 good players, they have about 25.
Yeah, and I just look at the England side and think, well, England could harm themselves by potentially picking the wrong side, going in with the wrong balance of a side, because how loyal do they be to the Broad and Andersons? I personally think they've somehow got to get Moen in this test match, even if it's batting at number 7 and bowling 10, 15 overs in the test match over 5 days, if his health will allow it, because I think England are going to need Moen in India. Be intrigued to see what sort of surfaces they play England on, whether they play on England on turning wickets, whether they've got any pace in them. All that boils down, because I think gone are the day of Indian batsmen not being able to play pace. I think if you listen to what Chetan said there about the Indian players, Rohit likes the ball to come on. He hits the ball well from not much foot movement inside the crease. Kohli the same. They like pace on the ball to sort of score off. So I'd imagine that there will be a little bit of pace in the pitch, and what the balance of England's side play. I think England's first 1 and 2, give me a little bit of concern. Whether it's Burns, Sibley, Crawley, two of them, huge emphasis on Root and Stokes to score big runs. But if Stokes has to score big runs, what sort of pressure does that put on his bowling when it comes to the balance of the side? So I still think there's a load of question marks to go with the England side. But the one thing that England have got in their favour, and I think it's massively in their favour, a bit like what India had when they went to Australia, there's going to be no fans there. The atmosphere is not going to be the same. It's not going to be as pressurised. It's not going to be as cauldron-like. It's not going to be as loud. They're not going to be on top of you and in your face sort of environment. So if England do get a little bit of a foothold in the series, then all of a sudden England will get confidence off the back of that. So I think all in all, it's about how England start with the ball, how England start with the bat, and how England start the series. And I think if they get off to a good start, I think they've got a chance of causing a little bit of an upset. If they consistently be like what Australia were, 2 down for not very many, I can't see England getting any sort of result in India, because we've seen not only, it doesn't matter about the strength and depth that India have got. It's about, I think, looking at England, have got to look at themselves. And I think picking the right side, having the right pace bowlers in, the right teams, in the right balance of attacks, I think is huge. And that worries me more than anything else, going to India as well as going to Australia.
What about Virat Kohli, Jarrod? Because, of course, he would have been sitting back watching all this with probably conflicting emotions. It would have hurt him enormously to have had to have left the team. I know he went for reasons that we completely understand, for the birth of his child, but I really thought and felt for him. He would have walked off the field in Adelaide embarrassed and hurt and angry, and then he would have left his team. He would have flown away. That is the last thing any professional sports person wants to do. Then he sits back and watches the guy that came in for him score, one of the great innings in recent Test history, one that would never be forgotten by India, and then go on and win a series. It could go one of two ways, couldn't it? But you just got the feeling he's going to want to get out there and he wants to get out onto that field and get the glory back, really. And it could be England that really, really suffer. If not Rohit, then it could well be Kohli doling out the pain.
Yeah, he's one of those hyper competitive players. Like, not all, especially in cricket, we don't get as many of those as maybe you get in some of the other ball sports where everything is about dominating and winning. I mean, Ricky Ponting's probably the best one, but if anyone watched The Last Dance, have a look at Virat Kohli. He's got that kind of incredible appetite to put himself in the right position. Interestingly enough, India looked like they played better under Rahane, who was not like that at all. Rahane's a really intelligent cricketer and always has been. Clearly not as good as Kohli. I don't know if Rahane's record's still the same, but up until recently, I think he was averaging more away from home than at home. No one does that anymore. That's not even a thing. It's just a really level-headed player. I remember seeing him in Durham. He opened in a one-day game, and he's not a white ball player and not an opener. Opened in a one-day game, and the ball was zipping around everywhere. And I watched him for 10 minutes and went, who is this guy? Where did they find this guy? And so, that will be interesting. The way that they get their balance back will be really, really interesting. If Kohli actually takes anything from this and goes, okay, there's more than one way to beat teams. Because I think if there's any at times, there's almost that Flintoff thing with Kohli. I remember when Kohli dominated Australia at the Adelaide Test, 3 tours back now. And I remember thinking, he's got to find a way to get everyone else to rise up around him. It can't just be him, which is what happened to Michael Jordan as well. Kohli hopefully has watched that and can bring this out. What I saw from this series is a potential for a 20-year run for Indian cricket. We know they have the players. We know they have the finances. It's ridiculous already that they aren't better than they are. I was thinking this morning, I don't know why, but do you remember Nasser Hussain called their fielders donkeys? What was that, about 5-6 years ago in England? Did you see some of the athletes that now play for India? Like, they are a phenomenally different team. And then you watch Washington Sundar, who hasn't played against fast bowling outside of India, who hasn't played a first-class game in 1,000 games, hooking Pat Cummins for 6. When India first came into Test cricket, their biggest problem was when people bowled fast at them, they would back away. Things have changed so much in Indian cricket. And if Virat Kohli is smart, he will maybe slightly change his attitude to captaincy, not his attitude to batting, but his attitude to captaincy, and actually will be able to harness what is the biggest beast we've ever had in cricket.
2 small things on Kohli. One, realizing what his team can do. That'd be huge for him. And 2, this little break, we've just seen what world-class players get rejuvenated after a little break, what it did for Joe Root. If this has done the same for Virat Kohli, England in for a long 4 Test matches.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell you what, I think it was, we were talking to Chetan. He was talking about 2001, 20 years since that famous series. It must be, was it 2002 that India last beat England in England? It's been a while either way, but we talk about India beating England in India as looking something approaching a formality, although you would have said that about Australia against India 4 Tests ago. So I'm not saying anything, but what is it about Australia? 2001, 2005, 2021. They always seem to lose the greatest series, don't they? Maybe it's just bias, and we're now.
That's our gift to cricket for all the winning.
Guys, go well. Jarrod, thank you so much, mate. We'll be in touch. Harmy, I'll see you at the end of the week. You're back down doing breakfast on Friday with the second Test match, Sri Lanka and England, getting underway early doors Friday. More early starts for myself and you. You could have a bit of a break, Jarrod. But for now, thanks for listening to the Cricket Collective on TalkSport 2.